Well, hey, Amy, thank you so much for coming on the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast. I am thrilled to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I hear from so many mamas that are either recently diagnosed with ADHD or they've were diagnosed in childhood, or more likely they're like, I think I am, and they're in that undiagnosed phase. But I just really am trying to get some expertise that I don't have to help support our overwhelmed moms, not only with decluttering, but also with the mundane, the other things that we have to do just to live our lives as moms. And so I really appreciate you being here to talk about all things about your book, but I'd love it if you could introduce yourself and tell us about you and your family and kind of how you serve women.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And yes, there is so much overlap with people. One of the most common things I hear in my community is people that are struggling with decluttering. That's one of the kind of the big things they want to tackle first. Okay, so I am 44. I live in Florida. I have three kids. They're 14, 10, and 6. So we've got quite the age span there. And I was diagnosed with ADHD as a child, which is kind of unique. A lot of women are diagnosed when their kids get diagnosed now, which is a huge blessing. But growing up, I didn't know anyone like me. And also, I always tell people this because I think so many people think, well, I was diagnosed early. And I was diagnosed. I had the blessing of being on medicine from an early age. But there was just so much we didn't know then. And one of the things is we just kind of thought it was a school and work thing. And so I assumed that, I didn't have big career ambitions growing up. I kind of thought once I become a stay-at-home mom, my life is going to become so much easier. And these things that I struggle with, being late to work, oftentimes I would be in a boring, I would go through this cycle of taking on a really challenging job and then I would burn out and then I would take on a boring job and then I would be bored. And it was kind of this cycle, this roller coaster. And I was like, once I'm a stay-at-home mom, everything will be easier. And then I was a stay-at-home mom and I was like, this is so much harder than it ever was for me working in professionally or in school. Like school is easy for me. And ADHD can look so different in so many people. But the thing that we all need is structure and routine and challenge and interests. And I was 100% not prepared for how much harder motherhood would be. And then as I had more kids, and then as I hit my 40s and hit the hormonal shift to perimenopause, it just all kind of came crashing down. And even though I was on medicine, and even though I knew I was ADHD, and even though I'd done years and years of therapy, um, I was really, really struggling. I was totally burned out, and I realized that I had never made there was no one there was no blueprint of what it looked like to be a mom with ADHD and to do it well. There was a lot of people talking about how to be a great mom, how to be a Pinterest perfect mom. And so I was tried to be a Pinterest perfect mom. And I tried so many chore charts and I tried all the things. And it was like my life just wasn't working. At the time, my oldest was getting diagnosed with autism. And I had a child from adoption who had significant trauma. And it was like, it wasn't just that I was struggling with motherhood. I was struggling to manage my ADHD while also managing these kids with big needs, while also, managing the boring things that I really hated. And so it was, this compounding effect of all these things. And no one was talking about all these things. There was books about, parenting people with ADHD, but in what that's like, and then but that's like this whole that's like a full-time job in itself. And then there's books about managing ADHD, and then that felt like managing my own mental health felt like a full-time job. It's like, how do I juggle all these things? And at the same time, I had these ambitions and ideas, and how do I design a life where all of this fits? And so that was kind of, I mean, really, it all came out of my personal struggle of trying to figure all of these things out. And as I made my way out of that crazy, crazy season and that deep burnout, I um, did it through basically, I took everything I learned about home management and family management and time management and kind of threw it out the window and just dug into the research about ADHD. And so much of it was the reading parenting resources and realizing, how do I parent myself with these strategies? How do I apply these things that we know about how you help and support someone with ADHD to myself. And then through that, I created a system, began coaching other women through that system to help them kind of apply these same transformations. And then that became a book. So I just am about to launch a book from I call it Master the Mundane, which is this system that I created to like help lead other people gently through these transformations that really impacted my life, that helped me create structure and rhythm without my life feeling like I was drowning. So yeah, so that's why we're here. I'm kind of doing the rounds, is sharing about my book, Master the Mundane. But that was kind of my heart, was as helping moms know that there's another way. That if you're a mom with ADHD, you kind of have to design your life. It impacts everything. It impacts how you live. It impacts how you parent. And giving women permission to do life differently and find what works for them.
And what I really love about the book, and I'm so excited for people to be able to read it, is that there's very practical, concrete strategies and examples so that instead of just this, like, oh, I have ADHD, like, I just need to figure out how to harness the chaos, you have that, but with so much grace, like, just so much grace throughout, which I think is incredibly important because, to my understanding, women with ADHD, there's a lot of shame, like, why don't I have it together? And in my sphere, it's like, why can't I just declutter the stuff? Why can't I get organized? Why can't I remember X, Y, and Z? And so I love that there's this deep understanding of how the brain is working, but then having the system, but not this rigid Pinterest perfect type of system that if you don't uphold it, then you're just going to be another thing that you're failing at. So I just wanted to let everyone know, if you're
Yeah.
looking for that grace filled book, but also the strategies that you can actually implement, that this is exactly what you need.
Thank you for that. That is my hope. And that, I think, one of the, foundational transformations is really learning to give yourself grace. And, once you understand, because I think there's this, one of the things I hear from people all the time is, they say like, well, ADHD is just an excuse. They're worried that ADHD is an excuse, that if they give themselves permission to kind of lower the standards, that they're like, either there's something they're less than, they're something wrong with them. But when in reality, if you step back and take a look at what ADHD is and how it impacts your brain, and how it just makes sense that your life would function differently. And then when you also take into account of parenting neurodivergent kids and the load that that has, that you can give yourself so much more grace, because you understand it's not that you're like lowering the bar, it's that you're understanding you're juggling a lot of different balls than someone else is. So you can't compare yourself to someone who is juggling fewer balls. You're, you know, they're doing so, and that's, I think, the biggest defeat. And when I started coaching women, gosh, probably when I was designing my Master of the Mundane program, and I did calls with women to just understand like what people really needed and how I could help. It was like the thing they said over and over again was that I feel like a failure, because the piece that it's not just that there is so much on us, but when you understand the HD brain, you realize perfectionism is a huge part of it. And part of it is because we have this unrealistic expectations for ourselves. Yes. So a big part of the one of the most common fear people have is like, well, I'm just incapable of creating a routine or creating structure. And they know they need it, but they can't do it. But it's because we so often make it way too complicated. And so a lot of what I do is give you permission to focus smaller and to make it easier and gentler. And so yeah, that's a big part of it, is that it's being gentle and realistic, and grace filled,
Yeah.
giving yourself kindness, learning to be your biggest cheerleader instead of turning off that voice that's like, this isn't good enough, or I'm not enough, or something wrong with me. That shame piece is huge, especially for women that were diagnosed later in life.
Yeah. And one of the things that I learned recently is about the ADHD brain being wired for novelty and wired for interest and everything. And you mention in the book about these different zones that we want to, we have the boredom zone on one side. We have the depletion zone on the other side where you could be burning out. And then you
Hmm.
have that activation zone, which is kind of like that sweet spot. And I was wondering if
Hmm.
you could just kind of explain the difference because we want to be in the activation zone, but a lot of times, especially with the mundane things of life, it seems hard. Like, how could cleaning my toilets possibly be in the activation zone? So, could you tell us about
Yes,
that?
yes, yes. So if you step back, kind of a piece of that is, um, understanding that our brains are, if you understand that the ADHD brain struggles with motivation, but really struggles with understanding, not just understanding information, but we have these unrealistic expectations because of how we see time, that we think we are these creative geniuses that have these big ideas and we think that we can do everything. We want to do everything because we're creative and interesting people, but then we think we should be able to do everything because of our struggle with understanding prioritization. It's like the functions that our brain would put brakes on things and be able to say like, okay, no, you just need to do these 3 tasks today. Our brains think we should be able to do 20 tasks and we want to do all the things. So we have to like learn how to basically parent our brain and help create structure around those things because it's so common for us. And it's like I mentioned, that roller coaster of the jobs of like thinking, because part of it's like thinking that I need to do less, that I'm less capable and taking this boring job, and then you get bored and then you take on too much. And that same roller coaster happens in motherhood too, because it might look like sign up for all these activities because you're bored and you need something, you need novelty. And then so you sign up for all these things or you commit to all these things and then you overdo it because you committed to too much. And we can do it for our kids too. Finding that balance for our kids is critical too. So part of it, it's realizing for yourself that we have to kind of think strategically about building in novelty and interest to our lives so that we aren't in that boredom zone. Because if you are, we do need challenge and we do need stimulation, but we need it in kind of the right amount. And so finding that kind of right amount is, it's a dance. It's because each person is a little bit different. Some people need lots of time with other people. Some people need lots of time alone with a laptop, writing words because like that's their thing. So what that stimulation looks like, what your sweet spot looks like is different. But one of the things that in terms of you mentioned and this explain this like I walk you through explaining it in the book, but um because one thing that can get tricky is when we do find the thing that we're really interested in. And I explain the 4 different types of ADHD moms in the book, but sometimes we do find something we really enjoy, and we find the work or the calling or the passion or the hobby that we love, and then what we tend to do is go all in on that and then neglect the boring things. But then what happens is we can still get really depleted because the boring things become so stressful. And so they take a much bigger role in our life because we waited till the last second. We kind of wait till the thing's on fire. It's like instead of like replying to the email right away, we wait till we have 10, we wait till the very last second because we're relying on urgency. Urgency is one of the things that does motivate us, but it is if we're relying on urgency for like the basic things of every life. Like for example, dinner. That's the easiest thing. If you don't have a plan for dinner and every night you do this work that you really love and you have this great day and you're productive, and then you come home at 6 o'clock and you have like no idea what food you have and you're scrambling for dinner, that you're adding so much stress to your life. And over time, if you're doing that about everything, the little things like packing the kids lunch in the morning or feeding yourself, like just the basic things that need to happen, if you're relying on urgency and waiting for those things to be so stressful, it's going to hold you back, even in the thing that you have found that you're really excited about and that you love, because you have this like extra this unnecessary chaos in your life. So we have to find that balance of like being on top enough of the basic things of daily life while also creating, having that right amount of challenge and having that right amount of stimulation for us. So it kind of takes stepping back. And so for me, I had to really redesign my life. I really had to scrape a lot of things and then kind of intentionally design a life where I had room for all of these things.
Yeah, and on the show we talk a lot about capacity, and you were talking about
Hmm.
it kind of like different moms have different balls in the air.
Hmm.
And when it comes to our EF, what you call EF capacity, which is our
Hmm.
executive function capacity, and like having this battery, if you think like, oh, okay, well, I work well under pressure or I work well under the urgency, that actually, like you said, it's stressing not only your nervous system, but then you're still having to make the decision about what's for dinner. It's
Hmm.
just under a lot of stress and pressure. So I would love it if you could talk a little bit about that capacity aspect, and then why, even though someone might say, oh, I don't really like routines, or I don't really feel like having a structure is like,
Hmm.
for me, you talk about the importance of having these rhythms, like the daily rhythm and weekly rhythm, that helps free up our brain and our executive function capacity. And I would love if you could dive into that a little bit, because I love that concept of like the battery, because I feel
Hmm.
like even if you don't have ADHD, that's still a helpful visual to understand, like, maybe today I'm only starting on like 25% because I was up all night with the baby. Or maybe I'm at 50%, but that means I'm not going to do 10 things. I'm going to try to do three. So if you could chat about that.
Yes. So, and there's a bunch of visuals in the book because I realized I just visuals help my brain function, and so I explain a lot through visuals. But the so the whole strategy kind of comes from this perspective of limiting our executive functioning capacity. So we aren't without executive function. We aren't, an executive function is our brain's ability to do specific things. There's these specific functions, our ability to self-motivate, our ability to initiate tasks, our ability to um, manage time, our working memory, our emotional regulation, um, these task planning. And so motherhood requires a lot of executive functioning. So my kind of whole book, whole philosophy is based on this idea that we have to be really strategic about how we're using that executive functioning. Because if we expect ourselves to have this unlimited amount, then that's not going to work. Especially if you're parenting neurodivergent kids that have these big emotions. If you have zero executive functioning left, I think about it like F's. Like if you have zero F's left at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, going into the dinner time hour, and you have to like, even if your spouse is however you manage tasks, whoever does what, you still need executive functioning left, and you still need to be intentional about how your expectations for yourself. So if you come going into 5 p.m. and you have no idea what's for dinner and you have no idea who's picking up what kid from what, if you have no idea what time you need to start bath time, if you have no idea who's controlling the homework, like all of that, those are tasks. A lot of people talk about spoons. Spoons is another analogy people use, but I just kind of needed to think about it specifically around like executive functioning. It's like if you have none left, then you're gonna want to hide in your room. You're not gonna be able to support your kids with their big emotions. You're not gonna be, regulated. And that is going to, over time, we talk about like get the depletion and getting a burnout. When you're doing that, if you think about like a bank, if you're overextending yourself, if you're in the red day after day after day after day, that's how you get an ADHD burnout because your life is expecting you to have way more capacity than you have. So instead, we want to start budgeting and thinking ahead about what is going to get our executive functioning so that we aren't doing that. And an HD brain is naturally going to do that because we struggle to prioritize and to plan. And so we have to kind of step back and think strategically about what is going to get our capacity. And then also knowing that some days our capacity is going to be low because of that's just part of ADHD. Some days our mental energy is lower. And I talked about that, the roller coaster and what happens, especially with moms with ADHD, is that when you overextend yourself or you do too much, then it's like you're completely drained. So we want to avoid getting to that place where we're, I share an example of in this I talk about it like having an executive function hangover. So we anytime you do anything big, like Christmas, birthday party, I host a dinner party, like I can knock it out of the park and we can have this great day. But then the next day I'm like a zombie. I'm like executive functioning zombie. I can't remember like where the coffee is or like just making any decisions. So those things are going to happen sometimes when we have days like really high capacity, high demand days. We want to try to limit those and be intentional so we're not setting ourselves up for that all the time. But we also want to have a plan for when we do have those low energy days. We're not beating ourselves up, but because what happens is if we try to like push through on those low energy days and you don't give yourself a chance to recover, then it's just going to get worse. And then it's going to be a week of you just being behind and getting derailed. And so, my whole kind of system is really designed with this idea of like being really intentional and strategic about your executive functioning so that you're not overcommitting yourself. And then also being able to shift when you have a low energy day, when you have less capacity. And part of that is assuming too, understanding that raising neurodivergent kids is gonna take part of your capacity. And I think a lot of time, and then managing your ADHD is going to take part of your capacity. So being able to realize that and then be strategic about how you're planning your time so that you can really manage your capacity. Because the thing is, the me, any mom I talk to with ADHD knows that they're like overcommitting or overscheduled, but they don't know how to stop because our ADHD brain naturally struggles with that. So try to walk you through exactly how to implement a system to start limiting your capacity and start living in a way so that you're not mentally drained and you're not going into depletion and you're not going to burnout because without intervention it is makes complete sense why you would, because that's what your brain struggled with. So,
Yeah, and I know that a lot of like planning or time management books, they'll always talk about, oh, your top three or whatever, but it's not coming from the same place. Like, I feel like when you talk about the daily three, which I want you to talk a little more about, but it's from this place of you're going to want to do more, you're going to want to overcommit, to overextend, but we have this limited capacity. And so we want to make sure that we are doing the things that we strategically are using that EF capacity in order to pick. And three, I think for anyone, this seems like, okay, that's doable. But can you talk about sort of the daily three? And if someone's like, oh my gosh, I have a million things, like how am I supposed to get it down to three?
exactly.
How
And
you make
that's
that
the thing.
decision.
That's so if you think so, going back to that day that I call them duvet days, when you're like have zero Fs, you can't even think about like what, because some days we're on top of it. Some days we're on the go and we're like, I got dinner planned. But what happens is it's like that never stays. And that's what is so hard because some days we're like, we're so organized and on top of it. And then we hit those down days. And so, especially on the down days, we want a plan for feeling like we're on top of our life, feeling we're on top of the basic things, the basic things, so that we're not going into that, chaos, urgency. What's the plan for the basic things? So if we're on that day when you have zero Fs, you can't think strategically, you don't know what you need to do, that you have a clear plan. And part of it is because, I know there's different strategies and there's the strategy of doing like the weekly reset. That idea of like kind of letting everything go to chaos and then kind of wiping the slate clean stresses me out. Like I can't I from my if my home is chaotic, it totally amps my anxiety. I get dysregulated. And so the goal isn't for your house to stay perfect, but it's to have a very clear idea of like what the three basic things are. So, especially if you're coming out of burnout, if you're coming from this place, and most women who start Master the Mundane are coming from a place of burnout, they're just completely mentally and physically exhausted. And so they need a plan forward. So, the idea is that to have a very clear sense of these are the three daily tasks that are going to help me function. My days are going to go smoother. So we're not trying to be perfect and do everything. Especially you go back to one of the executive functions is prioritization. And so we're great at knowing the 20 things that need to get done. But then if we have to choose that, we're burning executive functioning. So it's all about having a really clear sense of these are the top three priorities. And a big part of that, especially in the beginning, is if I do these things, then I can rest or then I can do something fun. So in the beginning, I want you because part of it is also knowing that in managing your home and family, managing your home is just one piece of it. So you're also trying to support your kids and you're also trying to manage your ADHD. So a lot of women come from this place of like they can't allow themselves to make any time for self-care or things that are going to help them regulate their emotions. And regulate their nervous system because they're just trying to get through that list of 20 things. And so getting they're never getting to the list done. They're never doing the things they need to care well for themselves, and they're struggling to support their kids. And so we want to focus on getting the basic things done while also building in some basic self-care habits and also supporting your kids. So it's kind of, we're not just trying to go all or nothing and do this like perfect house where we're on top of everything. We're creating a rhythm for the basic things of life while also building in that stimulation, which is so important. The mental stimulation, the physical stimulation, the self-care, which is going to help us get more productive. So, so it's a piece of it. That's a piece of like giving yourself permission to just start there because and then getting really clear about like what are the three things and not that I say you should do, but that are most meaningful to you. Because another big part of ADHD is we need autonomy. And so many of us are coming from this place of masking of thinking, okay, well this lady on the internet says that I should, go to bed every night with a clean sink, and that's the thing. But if that's not the thing that's going to really help your family function and your mental health and help alleviate your stress, then like who that you can let go of that standard. Like what are the three things that are like I talk about in the book, kind of moving out of chaos, like first focusing on that the basic daily things. So they need to decide it. They need to identify three specific tasks that can get done and that are that help and know that that's just part of it because I know they have all these things that they want to get done, but the way to get there is to give yourself permission to focus first on kind of phase one of like the self-care habits, the parenting, and the daily three, and then
Yeah.
we build from there.
And when someone feels like they kind of have the daily three going, they feel comfortable with that rhythm. If they're looking at something that would need to be planned, for example, I have two boys and it's just about soccer season.
Hmm.
So we knew when we signed them up kind of like what the time commitment would be, what the transportation situation would be, all of these things. But if a mom who is struggling and they want that novelty for themselves, or maybe their kids, like, oh, this is a great
Hmm.
opportunity, so we're going to do this. But then how do you not overcommit for something within like a season for yourself or your family because you recognize, okay, this is not within my capacity, or I'm going to have, EF hangovers or
Yeah.
whatever. So, how did you, or how have you been able to be like, okay, so I get the three, that's fine. I'm kind of doing the day to day,
Hmm.
but like not from a planning standpoint, kind of going just too far and then you're overcommitted and then you have burnout for that.
Hmm. Well, the master plan is 6 to 7 boring things a day, 6 to 7 taxing tasks. So that breaks down to the three daily tasks, and that's where I'm thinking about um, taxing tasks, like the boring tasks. So we can do well in the things that are fun or interesting. And in that 6 to 7, I'm really talking about home and family life. I'm not trying to fit work tasks into there. So if your work is very boring and draining, that's a whole separate problem. That's something that's going to be complicated. And I say that up front, like if so anyways, I won't go down that rabbit hole. But so 6 to 7 boring things. So 3 daily tasks, 2 weekly tasks, 1 monthly task, and then I say one like extra. I say 6 to 7, one extra. And so the extra I think about as the therapy. I gotta take the kids to Costco. I soccer practice. So so that's actually like one of the last things in the system that you work through is in and so starting to think strategically about your extras because some of that stuff is fun, but it also requires executive functioning. So it's like, okay, we got to get the soccer, and some of it you're doing it for your kids and you actually really hate it. Like that's important too. But you got to pack the cleats and you got to pack the soccer ball and all that stuff. So any of those extra activities is going to take extra energy. So that's going to bring, so we can have some budget. So we want to get to a place where we can do 6 to 7 things. So if you're in burnout, 6 to 7 things is you've been in the deficit for so long, it might take you a while to get there, but you get there by like I talk, a big piece of this is like the things that you're going to do to help manage your ADHD. So you don't, you get there by going small, building the habits, but not trying to do it all at once. So I 100% it's part of it. And I want that's a piece that just continue to be strategic about and measure your capacity. But and again, it's knowing what matters to you and to your family and to your kids. There's some people who families that are travel sports families and they love it and their kids are super into baseball and like that's their thing. Well, like that's great if that's your thing. And that's your Saturdays are going to be going to that. That might be that, but then Sundays you might need to leave open because you might need a recovery day. So it's knowing yourself and being able to kind of think strategically about those extras that you take on. So 100%, the idea isn't to lead a small life. The idea is to lead an intentional life and to think strategically about what you're getting your energy to, knowing that your brain's tendency is to want to say yes to all the things and then get yourself in a pickle.
Yeah. And I can't let you go before we talk about decluttering. This is because I do work with moms with ADHD a lot, and they're like, okay, well, what happens is everything just is chaotic. And I get the trash bag and I rage declutter and I go around and I just grab all the things. And then, or oh no, my mother in law is coming to visit and I only have like 20 minutes before she's at the door. I'm going to shove everything into the closets and everything. But of course, when you're dealing with urgency or coming from a place of dysregulation, it's not sustainable. So I would love to hear your kind of best tips, either with what you do or what you recommend that your community members do as far as approaching decluttering, because it does require a lot of executive function as far as the activation energy to just like start, but then
hmm
also the decision making of actually like, what am I doing with this thing and where is it going? And a lot of people, they'll avoid it altogether because that in and of itself is just too overwhelming to have to make those types of decisions. So any tips about how we can have a
Yes, yes,
sustainable decluttering plan?
yes. And okay, so one thing that I want to be clear of is that especially people with ADHD, there might be one area of your life where you really, really struggle and you need one-on-one support. And decluttering might be one of them. One of the things that I we do in our community is body doubling. And so I think body doubling can be really helpful, even if you have a friend come over. So I think there's nothing wrong with you if that's what you need. If that's the magic bullet to get you to do the thing is to have someone come over or to hire a professional. Sometimes a lot of people in our community have hired someone to come organize and they might do it side by side. So we cannot, I understand that you can't afford to outsource everything, but know that there are some things that you might need to outsource and and being able to be honest about that and have no shame and being like, okay, this is just such a hard area for me that I really need help. And so that is 100% okay. For me, what I have found, I love what you said. Like I call it the big trash bag energy, and that is 100% dysregulation. That is coming from a place of dysregulation, and when we do that, and oftentimes when people in our community, and did this for so long, so many times that I would, we love to blow our lives up. and then want to create a completely new system. And we want it to be completely elaborate. And so we don't want to just declutter a drawer. We're like, we're going to declutter the whole house and we're going to do it in 30 days. And we're going to do like, and our we lack the stamina to do those things, and that burns so much executive functioning. Blowing up your life burns so much executive functioning. So I think for me, what has worked and what I encourage people to do is to make decluttering a weekly habit and then be very flexible about it. So, and so for a long time, I remember several years ago when minimalism was like everywhere. I was like, I wanted a rule. I wanted like, tell me how many cups I need and it was, but I was like, that just didn't work. What worked for me is just consistently moving through my house and not trying to follow any rigid schedule. I love creating the rigid schedules. Like, okay, I'm gonna do this week. I'm gonna do kitchens, and then what has worked is just consistently moving through my house, decluttering one thing a week, and celebrating even the small things. So it's like, okay, sometimes I'm gonna draw a drawer. Some days I'm like, okay, I'm gonna clean up my whole closet or I'm gonna clean up my whole dresser. Like that's helped me just keep momentum and focus on just building momentum and then recognizing that it's an ongoing habit. So I say like decluttering, but like really now I don't have massive decluttering to do in my house. I mean, my garage, there's the garage is not great, but like I have to keep build doing the momentum because then and focus first on kind of building the momentum and focus first on function. Because what happens is we want to make it this super complicated, like Pinterest perfect thing, and then we want to go buy a ton of organizers. Instead, just focus on building the habit and then focus on letting your space improve over time, making your space more functional, and then over time kind of moving to the aesthetics. So it's like, because I love the aesthetics. I love the like I see the home edit pictures and I'm like, oh, I want it to look like that. When in reality, that is, I can spend a bunch of money I don't need to, and I can also waste a bunch of time that I don't need to. Instead, it's just focused on making the habit, consistently doing it, and then over time, doing small tweaks to make it more aesthetic, but really focus first on function. So, so on my weekly task list, I always try to just do something. And I let myself follow the whims. Because if I'm like, oh, some days I'm like, oh, this drawer is bugging me, that's gonna do that drawer and that's gonna be my thing this week, and that's okay. Instead of that's helped me make more momentum. And I kind of do the same thing with deep cleaning. I kind of say like, I'm gonna kind of deep clean something, and some days it's the window. I just let it be very flexible. Whatever, and like whatever's bugging me, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do that. That's gonna be okay. Because if I try to make it too rigid, then I rebel and then I throw it all out the window. So that's
I,
what's worked for me.
I love the permission slips. Sometimes I feel like I'm the Oprah of permission slips. And I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to do it a certain way. And yeah, I was nodding along to everything because I'm very function forward with how I help people. And you can talk about time blindness. Like you start doing research on like all the organizing things, and you could just do that for hours and hours. So also the celebration is something that you mentioned. And I was reading that in your book that a lot of times, if you have ADHD, you're just wanting to move on to the next thing and you don't take the time to actually like celebrate the fact that you've been able to do something. Or maybe after 1 week, you're like, oh, I did my 3 to 6 to 7 things per day, like taking a
Mhm.
moment to actually recognize and celebrate that. And I'm sure your community is a great place to be able to do that. So thank you so much. This was such an amazing conversation. And I would love it if you could tell us where people can get the book and also where they can connect with you if they want to learn more about your group that does the body doubling, just all the things.
Yes. Okay. Well, my website is www.amymariehann.com. So there's links to everything there. And my Instagram is at Amy Marie Hann. That's where I'm the most active on Instagram. And then we'll make sure you have the link here. The book it is available for pre-order now. It'll be available on September 10th, everywhere books are sold. So I'll make sure that you have the link for my book launch. So if anyone orders before September 10th, there's a bunch of freebies that they get by pre-ordering, and they actually will get the link to start reading right away. They'll get the pre-read link is already set in the email, and that will be available until the book before September 10th. So,
Wonderful.
yes.
I will put everything in the show notes. And again, it's if you're like, oh, it's just, another book. I don't want to read another book. This doesn't even feel like you're reading a book, honestly, because it's just like so well structured and all the examples. And it's very, of course, ADHD brain friendly. So I will put everything in the show notes. But thank you so much, Amy. It was such a pleasure talking to you today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me, Emily.